October 3rd, 1963. A violent coup in Honduras begins 2 decades of military rule. Enjoy that W for the next 50 days, JFK.
Welcome to The Revisionists. I'm Brian Flynn.
I'm Zach Powers.
And hitting the vape and joining us is Zach's co-host on the movie Trap, Russell Carlson.
Hello. Thank you. I'm Russell Carlson. Thank you for having me. It's a true honor. Thank you very much.
Now, Brian, you've mistaken Russell's intention here. That was not a vape for the sake of vaping. He was trying to create creepy Halloween fog for this. The first in our 3 spooktacular entries. This year is a three-fer spooktacular.
Yeah. Nice.
They call him the human fog machine. Because he just rips that cotton.
That's right.
I'm sorry.
So I even brought my Halloween cookies, that my parents got me in the best bakery in Colorado, for sure. They're little pumpkins.
Nice.
They're awesome. Very happy. So I'm feeling very festive.
Very convenient. We cannot have any of those because obviously we're not in the same places because of the disease.
Yes, indeed. Speaking of spooky.
Yeah. If the world,
there's a difference between spooky and terrifying.
Sure.
Like, it's October 2020, and we have an extra spooky entry because maybe the world's not scary enough for you. And this may be the most scary month of my entire life so far.
Yep.
They've only gotten better every year.
Look, I know this is coming out October 3rd, ladies and gentlemen, but we're recording this September 27th. And oh boy.
Yeah. Fall. We're just now getting into fall. Hopefully by now fall has come and the fires might have stopped. But who knows?
Indeed.
Yeah, the second wave of COVID is in the air.
Yeah, that's right. Because college football had to happen, and everybody's going to be sent home with COVID.
The leaves are dying, and so is everybody else.
That's right. It's a beautiful sight.
Yeah, but no, yeah. So, listeners, if you're wondering what we actually do on this show, other than
bring us on to talk about what's going outside in our window.
And just watch the world become the happening.
Yeah. The purpose of this podcast is technically for you to close your eyes and pretend the world around you doesn't exist. Be transported back to the times in history that were in some ways worse than now, honestly.
Especially this one.
Yeah, I mean, this is
one of the rare ones where no one dies. So I'd actually say this is a light
yeah,
romp.
No one dies.
There's no slavery in this story.
That's true.
Verified no slavery, no sexual assault. Hey, this is a TVG for our podcast.
Sure. But
yeah, put this one on for the family.
Sure. When you're in the mood for mass hysteria.
Yeah.
What we typically do, and what we're going to do also tonight, is we take a topic from history, either a person, place, or thing, and one person presents the official, man-sanctioned, trick-or-treat street safe Halloween version of that story, and another person comes up with a creepy crawly Devil's Night alternate take on that history. And the winner becomes the truth, and I'm normally not straining this much to try to inject some fucking Halloween into it. But it's our spooktacular, so that's just what we do.
Yes, chains, rattling bones, bat noises,
spiders. I'll put in spiders later. Mm-hmm.
Sure, and this one definitely creaking doors and coffins.
Cat scare.
Yeah, Elvira saying something. It doesn't matter what, just
sure.
The other one, Joe Bob Briggs being actually himself, it turns out.
Sure. Yep.
But anyway, on our last episode, which was on the topic of medical history, which we're going to take a brief diversion from, we discussed National Hotel Disease. As of this recording, the final listener vote results are not in. But the initial vote is for the alternate history, but we'll break that down later. So that's just a little tease. Right now, listeners, we're going to talk about the Highgate Vampire. And Russell, you're presenting the actual history?
Indeed, I am.
Right. And Zach's taking the alternate?
Yeah, I'm taking the alternate.
All right. Well, Russell, whenever you're ready, take it away.
Okay. So the Highgate Vampire, as we call it, took place around the 70s. Highgate is a neighborhood/village in London, and it took place around the Highgate Cemetery. Highgate is kind of known for these kind of spooky kind of things, dating all the way back to the 17th century, apparently, where this in which Sir Francis Bacon, attempting to prove freezing meat could preserve it in a very heated argument with his buggy ride compatriot.
I mean, to be fair, he was right on that.
Sure, he was, but they found a chicken.
His last name was Bacon.
Indeed, if anybody knows about preserving meat, it would be Bacon.
Damn it.
So he takes him and his buddies,
and his buggy driver was named Ralph E. Coli, I think.
He was from out of his name is Sir Salmonella. Yeah. So they get a chicken, and they pluck the chicken and kill the chicken, half plucked, and then bury it into the snow. Apparently, it took a long time for them to do this. Well, it was apparently a very heated argument between him and his friend. But not heated enough to keep Sir Francis Bacon warm, because he ended up getting a frozen chill and died very soon after this experiment. After his death, however, again, dating all the way back to the 17th century, there was reports of a spectral half-plucked chicken could be seen running around Pond Square in Highgate.
Now, listeners, when I suggested this topic, I did not even realize this part of the story, which is fucking great.
I mean, I stumbled upon that in, anyway. But our story starts around 1967. The first account really takes place in the London Evening News in November 2nd, 1968, and I'll quote the article directly. On the night of Halloween, 1968, a graveyard desecration by persons unknown occurred at the Tottenham Park Cemetery in London. These persons arranged flowers to be taken from graves in circular patterns, with arrows of blooms pointing to a new grave, which was uncovered. A coffin was opened, and the body inside, quote-unquote, disturbed. But most of their macabre act was driving an iron stake in the form of a cross through the lid of the breast of the corpse. This was largely the beginning of this theory that there was a vampire haunting this cemetery.
To be fair, I can see it.
Sure. I mean, I can't imagine, and apparently the cemetery at the time was very in disrepair. It was pretty much neglected, pretty much just a place to hang out and do a bunch of pagan weird sex shit. So apparently,
whoever did this obviously they got the material of the stake wrong, which is interesting. Seems like a rookie vampire hunter mistake.
Oh, well, I wait till you meet the heroes of our story. So in 1967, two teenagers were walking near the cemetery and claimed to see the dead rising from the graves. In 1968, a man named McLean, his girlfriend
was like, it's a couple of teens.
Yeah, a couple of teenagers said they saw this, and there was a bunch of letters in there. But in 1968, a man named McLean, his girlfriend Elizabeth was bitten. Enter Sean Manchester. Sean Manchester is a quote-unquote bishop from the quote-unquote old Catholic Church. He's a self-proclaimed vampire hunter, self-proclaimed exorcist expert.
I believe he is still alive to this very day.
He very much is, and very much recluse.
Also, I like how you said self-proclaimed vampire hunter. As if the board wouldn't have certified him.
Yeah.
I'll get to the
Into every
later.
generation, there is born one slayer, and it was not Sean Manchester.
It was not. But to Sean Master, this is a quote from Manchester. If I believe in Christianity and in the supernatural, it doesn't seem that much of a leap for me to believe in vampirism.
And you know what? I got to give it to him.
That's fair.
That's fair. If you're going to believe in the devil and shit,
Yeah.
go for it.
I think that's fair.
Who gives a fuck?
Yeah,
What's the point in believing in magic if you're just going to be like halfway there and stop? Go the full way.
Honestly,
Precisely.
like, this year has been almost enough for me to be like, I kind of almost wish I did believe in just like, yeah, the devils and vampires, why not? Let's spice it up a little bit.
Well, and at the time, this story was starting to catch on that there was a vampire, not even beyond the local newspaper, which was the Hampstead and Highgate, nicknamed the Ham and High. And there was a lot of reported in there about Manchester because he claimed he tried to do an exorcism on McLean's girlfriend Elizabeth, and it didn't work. So he said it must have been a vampire.
Now, when you say
vampirism,
they claimed she was bitten, did they like expand on that at all, or were they just like, yeah, I got bit?
There were weird marks on her hand, so they said, and they said that according to McLean, she had like an exorcist moment where like she just shot up in bed and started speaking in a man's voice, saying that like I'm going to take you both down. That's according to McLean. Of course, he believed the whole vampirism thing. He's quote, I knew it was a vampire at that point. Anyway, so
you've been watching a lot of Batman the animated series. He didn't mention that the quote ended with Joker.
Harvey Dent, can we trust him?
Riddle me this, vampire. Okay, so in 1969, David Farrant, local magician, and again, self-proclaimed expert on the occult and supernatural.
Yeah. Local magician.
Yes.
If he were on a local news story, the little scrawl at the bottom would say,
local magician.
Local magician.
Right. And it means you should definitely listen to this guy because he's definitely serious about what he's saying. In 1969, on Christmas Eve, he had claimed by walking in the cemetery, he glimpsed a, quote, gray figure, which he considered to be supernatural, and asked in the newspaper if anyone had seen anything similar. This was around February 6, 1970. By February 13th, everybody had replied. Several people said, oh, I saw goats. There was a guy in a tall hat. There's a bicyclists, women in white, a lot of shaking bars and wading through ponds and all that stuff. So it kind of took on a
regular
life of its
Disney's
own.
The Haunted Mansion over there.
Right. Yeah. So it kind of took on a life of its own, and David Farrant sort of became like this unofficial correspondent for the Ham and High. Yeah.
There was one guy who drove past in his car, and then there was a mirror at the end of the cemetery, and there was a ghost in his car with him.
Exactly. He gets into the cab, and the cabbie's a zombie.
I like how I also just like how one of them is just like guy in a tall hat, which is
one of them is a bicyclist. Like, a guy on a bike.
Also true.
Right, yeah. They claim to see people walk from the graves in Highgate Cemetery and into the walls of the mausoleum and apparently disappear. So, yeah. That sort of ramped up around 1970, and it sort of hit like a fever pitch because at the same time, Sean Manchester claimed that it was vampirism and knew it was vampire, a king of vampires, if you will. This is like the mega vampire.
He said it was somebody who practiced black magic in what's it called? Wachhalia, the place where Wallachia, yes, where Vlad the Impaler was from, and died there and became a vampire king.
Yes, indeed. So this actually started growing into a war of words in print between Manchester and Farrant. So much so that each claiming that they were the ones who could expel the vampire because they were experts and they knew what they were doing. It got so much that even ITV, the national media started to take notice and interviewed both of them. And both of them, knowing that they were going to be on TV, claimed that they are going to be the ones to slay the vampire. We're going to do it on Friday the 13th. So it aired on Friday the 13th, and within 2 hours, there was a mob of people getting into that cemetery, armed with stakes. The police tried to stop them. They literally rush over and destroy like a lot of that cemetery. Like they start hacking. It's bad. And it didn't really stop from there, but that was like the fever pitch, and everybody thought that there was vampires and they were turning these corpses into vampires, and it just turned into an absolute shit show. So basically, some months later, there's a bunch of grave desecration in that summer, so much so that even Ferrant got caught and was arrested because they thought he did it. He claimed that it was Satanists who did it. But he was seen around the cemetery with a stake and a crucifix. So yeah, it kind of, and then, but Manchester was sort of doing the same thing, claiming that he had actually already killed the vampire by going into this farmhouse and driving a stake. He was too scared to go in there and open it, so he just left a clove of garlic and walked away.
I really like the idea of a self-appointed vampire hunter being like, no, I didn't desecrate these graves. It was Satanists.
Yeah.
And it's such a weird distinction for me to draw because you're both LARPers. Like,
yes. It is, and it kept going because they even got to the point, the rivalry around August of that year, they were even going to have a magical duel. Apparently it never took place, but they couldn't agree on the terms, I guess.
Yeah. Which magic was allowed, which magic was barred.
Obviously. Right. Obviously.
Conjuration, abjuration, necromancy,
Indeed.
chronomancy. These things have to be worked out.
Fairy dust, anyway.
No, don't even bring the Fae in here.
Right.
Yeah.
So David Ferrant eventually sued the News of the World because they kind of made a report that David Ferrant was actually going at all these graves and digging these things up and stabbing these corpses.
That's one of the most reasonable British tabloid stories I think I've ever heard.
Yeah, and then they sued. His contention was that they called him a cat killer because around the one cemetery, there was a bunch of dead animals that had apparently had their throats slashed and all the blood drained.
Mostly, right?
Yeah, something like that. It was, the research I couldn't find, it was a lot of this, because the problem with all of this stuff is it's largely told from the perspectives of either David Ferrant and Sean Manchester, and both of them, all they do is just try to exclude the other one. That
they seem to be prolific liars even in later parts of their lives.
Yeah, and they seem to be bitter that there's somebody who's doing the same thing.
Truly, go ahead. There was a cat that went missing, right?
Yeah, a cat went missing, and they thought that David Ferrant did it, and blah, blah, blah.
I think he was released on that charge.
The charges were dismissed. Yeah. The charges were dismissed, but didn't stop Sean Manchester from touting out in the Hollis building, saying that he's an ex-con, and you can't really believe anything David Ferrant says. So
the vampire hunter thing we're cool with.
Right,
but
exactly.
The fact that he got arrested.
Right. Well, and a lot of these are questioning each other's bona fides.
No, totally.
In vampire hunting.
It's actually, my favorite thing about the story is how much of these two are, like, in very slightly different circumstances, they would be such great partners. Like, they're a match made in heaven. They're the same dude. Like, they're the same guy.
It is totally the Star Trek quote, in another universe, we would have called each other friends.
Yeah, it's like, this is Step Brothers, basically.
Yeah.
Basically, yeah.
Right. So the entire story kind of gets claimed by Manchester that it ended in 1973, where he claims to have driven the stake through the vampire's heart at the nearby House of Dracula in Crouch End, later to be adapted by a Stephen King book called Crouch End. Anyway.
Wait, is House of Dracula, was that like was that like a breakfast place?
No
or what?
Those are his words.
Was it just like a place he called the House of Dracula?
That's true. It's the International House of Dracula.
I would eat at a restaurant. A restaurant called House of Dracula. It's basically like a rainforest cafe or medieval times, but it's...
Yes.
Dude,
right.
But actually there is one on Times Square. There's that monster-themed restaurant.
What?
Yeah, there's a monster-themed restaurant on Times Square where like everybody dresses as monsters or some shit. I forget what it's called, but it's very real.
Oh my God. It's just Red Lobster.
I would just think that, the International House of Dracula would just be a blood bank.
Yeah.
You'd think it's just where they just take in donations or whatever. So anyway,
sorry, I just pictured like it's a regular IHOP, but the syrup jugs are all just labeled A positive, B positive, O negative.
Lovely. So the Highgate and the whole thing kind of the dealing with the vampire dies down.
Just to get it out there, it's called the Jekyll and Hyde Club. I don't think it's in Times Square. I think it's in New York.
I'm making reservations.
It's on it's on Manhattan Island.
Okay.
Right. I'll be damned. I've never been there. But so 1973 rolls around and Manchester claims to have killed the vampire. And then that's where the real fun begins between these two. Because that's where on that 1973 it got so bad that Ferrant was jailed in 1974 for interfering with the dead remains of Highgate Cemetery again. They kept writing about the Highgate Vampire. Manchester wrote a book called The Highgate Vampire. David Ferrant wrote a book saying Beyond the Highgate Vampire. Each one kind of trashing the other.
Such a fuck you to the other book.
Right, yes. So it got so bad that they started forming boards, basically. So David Ferrant had founded and presided over the British Psychic and Occult Society, while Sean Manchester founded the British Occult Society. These books, they kept going for almost 50 years because the book wasn't published until 1985 and Ferrant's book wasn't published until 1991. So the whole time they're trading insults. And then even in 2013, Manchester has retired from public life and won't be talked to by journalists.
And I think, both of them, even while they're trading insults with each other, they're constantly going after anybody else who says anything about either of them.
That's right.
It's very aggressive with anybody who says anything to besmirch their reputation.
Indeed. That's why a lot of this is kind of just, you have to take them from their word to kind of suss out the bullshit a little bit.
Did you read the thing about Manchester's reviews of his book?
No, I did not.
Apparently there were a ton of 5-star reviews of Manchester's book, and they were all by the same user named Veritas, who also left a 1-star review of Ferrant's book.
How can we get to the bottom of this?
It's a mystery, total mystery. So it seemed to me that David Ferrant, they were all trying to kind of claim this. David Ferrant even ran in a general election in 1978 as the sole candidate for his own Wicca Workers' Party. It is a platform of free sex and nudity, and restoring the Wiccan creed, outlawing communism, establishing state brothels, restoring true power of the monarchy to the royal family, and leaving the EU common market.
You know what? It started strong. And then it went off a cliff at a certain point.
Yeah. That's also, I like that they differentiated between free sex and nudity, because, I mean, one begets the other.
Yeah, and needless to say, he lost. I know that's shocking to hear, but
that's why Great Britain is now called Fuck Island.
Right. Well, I mean, he did get a lot of votes considering that platform. A disturbing amount of votes. But according to Merlin,
could he be worse than Boris Johnson? Really?
I was going to say.
I mean, I'd say it'd probably be about the same, right?
Actually, he still wanted to leave the EU, I guess.
Yeah, and ending communism, that totally sounds like Johnson.
But he'd have magic, so.
That's true. But free sex parties, I'm willing to bet. Okay, so really the whole era of the mid-70s is kind of the beginning of like this folklore horror. Our movie, The Wicker Man, that we did in the Movie Trap is sort of featured in this, according to Merlin Coverley, and he sort of blames that movie for sort of enticing the public and people like Ferrant and Manchester for kind of hyping up this sort of occult-like kind of craze that was going on in the 70s. Mm-hmm. And it kept going, apparently. So the feud... Really, the story is just the feud between Manchester and Ferrant, really, is that whole dynamic has just kept the whole myth alive. It's far outlived the interest of even the Highgate Vampire, even though the Highgate Vampire has been featured in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It's been featured in video games. Like I said, the Stephen King short story.
Specifically, the Buffy comics, not the main show.
Yeah, so. Right.
Okay.
Even though it's called Season 9. That's true. So anyway, there is David Farrant died very recently, actually.
Last year in 2019.
Yeah, he died in 2019. And it seems like a lot of other people seem like he was a much more enjoyable person to be around, whereas Manchester was a stuffy wannabe. I mean, if you see footage of it in the 70s.
Or now. Look up a picture of this.
Oh,
dude.
my God. Yeah. I mean, the closest thing I could find was a 1999 Discovery Channel documentary. And he's got these mutton chops that are something to behold. But even in the 70s, you could tell he just like, I'm a bishop, see? Look, I'm wearing the thing. Bishop, you have to listen and respect me. Whereas David Farrant was very much like, I'm a magician. You have to listen and respect me. So... yeah, there's even a lot of groups online. There's Friends of the Sean Manchester Society. They are very, very active, and trying to get in touch with them, apparently, according to a Vice article, is very difficult, and they're love to blame other journalists and still to this day say that David Farrant was a grumpy fraud.
Not just fraud, a grumpy fraud.
Yeah.
Multiple people can be grumpy frauds.
Yeah.
Yes. When David Farrant died, though, apparently Manchester did certainly kind of release like a self-penned eulogy for Farrant that was mostly magnanimous. But again, that feud is what made the Highgate Vampire legend today. Was to, if you read the initial article, they say journalists. When you do further reading, they were not journalists.
No.
They wrote in newspapers, but that was not what I would call journalists.
In much the same way that Tucker Carlson is not a journalist.
Indeed. So yeah, I think that's about all I've got. I hope I didn't brutalize that too much for you guys. I listened to a couple episodes, so I tried to.
No, that was great.
No, good.
Good. Yay.
And like the reason I went with this one, like I wanted this year since we were able to do 3, I was like, oh, I want to do like a vampire hysteria thing. But the thing is, all the ones from like the 17 and 1800s are just people who had tuberculosis. And this one seemed a little more interesting.
Right. Yeah. And nothing really bad happened. There were some animals being killed. And again, it's not fun that the corpses and all the gravestones were. I mean, apparently Highgate Cemetery is much improved now. It's very much more like a genteel tourist attraction. But it's now, in the 70s, it was apparently a shithole.
I mean, honestly, by our standards, that's still TVG. We're still good to go. But Zach, whenever you're ready.
Yeah. So, also got some things right. Obviously, I agree that Farrant and Manchester's rivalry, they overshadow the rest of the story, and they cause us to forget the main character in this little drama, the vampire.
I really thought you were going to do a full-on Andrew from Buffy pronunciation.
And we have to note that the vampire did know Farrant and Manchester. He actually met Farrant first, as Russell said, on Christmas Eve in 1969. Farrant was passing by the snow-covered Highgate Cemetery when he was accosted by wolves, and the mysterious vampire intervened and saved his life, taking Farrant back to his crypt for a strange and romantic winter's night.
I've seen Romance with Vampires, sir. It is not that attractive.
If you've seen some of the movies from the late 70s, I've seen.
Yeah. Oh, yes. A lot of trimming.
Regardless, if you're a vampire, you can't spend your whole life at the cemetery. And the vampire may have lived at the cemetery, but he spent his days at Highgate College just trying to fit in. I mean, and that's super hard. That's super hard when, like the Highgate Vampire, you're hot as fuck. So,
and
I really would have thought he'd been
and
taking
you can only
night
take
classes.
night classes.
Yeah.
Well, he's a daywalker.
Okay. Good to know. Of course.
He just sparkles when he goes outside.
Manchester was also attending Highgate College at the time. Mm-hmm. And one day in the parking lot, the mysterious vampire appeared from nowhere to save Manchester from an out-of-control car. And
no!
You know, at first, this weird relationship between the three of them seemed fine. Farrant, in the evenings, cultured the vampire on how to eat and drink more civilly and behave like a human, growing ever closer. And during the day, Manchester and the vampire would go to the woods and do spider monkey runs, and everybody was happy. Now, each of these sort of couples had their own names for each other. Because Ferret was human and a representative of mankind, the cutesy nickname that he eventually got was Mencken, a strange twist on mankind. And because vampires fall to dust when killed.
And not the wrestler Mankind also.
Right, yeah, right.
So he was called Mencken, yeah. And because vampires turned to ash when killed, Ferret began to call the vampire Ashman. So they became Mencken and Ashman.
Is it okay if, I hope you don't mind, but I'm just picturing Ferret as Robert Stack from Unsolved Mysteries and Manchester as Bill Shatner from Rescue 911.
You could picture them however you want.
Whatever.
The vampire is totally John Carradine.
Your mind, your rules.
That's how I'm casting it in my head.
So yeah, Ferret, who was kept captive in the vampire's house, they became Mencken and Ashman, and had their whirlwind winter romance. Meanwhile, the vampire called Manchester Bella because he was so beautiful. And Manchester called the vampire weird and unhealthy conservative Mormon themes about sex, love, and marriage, which is kind of a mouthful.
It's a bit unwieldy.
Oh, wow. Unwieldy. Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, but you know, who knows how these nicknames start. But eventually trouble arose in paradise. When Ferret and Manchester found out about each other, and their rivalry began in earnest. At first, Ferret put a rotten fish in the hood of Manchester's car. Manchester put saran wrap on Ferret's toilet.
Oh no! Oh, that's the worst.
Ferret dug up the corpse of Manchester's mother and desecrated the grave. Manchester
That's an escalation. That's a bit of an escalation.
That's a lot.
And Manchester sacrificed Ferret's pets to pagan gods. So traditional sort of magician, bishop, vampire hunter rivalry.
/ love triangle.
Yeah. So eventually, Manchester got sick of the fact that Ferret was living at the crypt, and he stirred up the easily frightened townspeople to rush to the Highgate Cemetery and kill the beast once and for all. Though his intention was, in fact, to go on a night that he knew that his vampire lover would be off playing baseball with his family during a thunderstorm.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury.
He knew that the vampire would be off playing baseball during a thunderstorm, as vampires do, and only Ferret would be present, and they could kill Ferret in his stead. But Ferret managed to escape, and instead the graveyard was only ransacked. So when the vampire came home and found his home ransacked and Manchester and Ferret locked in combat, he decided that these losers weren't ready for that poly lifestyle, and they were definitely not ready for immortality. And so he left Highgate and that entire situation, this whole production. He went on to do more serious work, got a lot of legitimate acclaim. He recently recovered from COVID-19.
Oh boy.
Not expecting that. You know what? Good for him.
Yeah. He's doing good. A lot of people respect him now. Meanwhile, Ferret and Manchester ended up living next door to each other and growing old, only one door apart, became bitter rivals, always pulling pranks on each other. Eventually, Anne Margaret moved to their town, and their old rivalries escalated again. They were adapted into a couple movies in the 90s.
You may have heard about them. Sophia Loren was in the sequel.
Yeah, those films did cut most of the animal sacrifice and necrophilia. Mm-hmm. About 90%.
You gotta get that PG rating.
Yeah.
You gotta get that PG rating.
I'm really, really trying to picture Jack Lemmon on set being like, "What do you want me to do to the rabbit?"
Now see here, you gotta take the bunny upside down and you slit it down its throat. I can't do Walter Matthau.
Well, Mary, I'm gonna lasso the moon for you.
Yeah. We're just going all the way to, so Ferret eventually marries Anne Margaret, and Manchester decides to marry their newborn child immediately after it's born because Twilight is fucked up.
Forgot about that part of it.
Yeah.
Guy worked a lot to forget. That took a lot of work.
But there's one lingering question. What about all the desecrated graves? The answer is clear. The Highgate Vampire likes to fuck in a coffin. And that is the true story. The true story of the doomed romance of the Highgate Vampire, Ferret, and Manchester.
That's right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That was good.
I don't know if my Mencken and Ashman thing translated, but it was supposed to be a Beauty and the Beast riff on that side of the relationship.
Okay.
I mean, it hit our niche for sure.
Oh, yeah. Well, and then again, the Twilight got right in there. Yeah, that was certainly more entertaining. Well, yeah, I mean, like that would certainly be. I mean, because if there was evidence of the magical duel actually happening, that would have been awesome.
Yeah,
you know, like that would have been.
I wish
cool.
I could have incorporated a magic duel in there, and that would have made it exciting. But the
fact that these fuckers actually,
I don't want to support
the
J.K.
point.
Rowling right now.
Yeah.
There you have it. Nice. There you go. There you go. There you go. And not until George R. R. Martin writes another fucking book. Excuse my language. Yeah.
But the fact that they publicly got to the point of challenging each other to a magic duel is one of my favorite parts of this whole.
Truly the Burr and Hamilton of Highgate in the 70s.
Yes. The High and Ham was the dueling grounds of Hamilton and Burr and Jefferson and Hamilton and blah, blah, blah. But yeah, no, and I think a lot of it is that part of the reason why this newspaper kept publishing is people kept buying it. You know, they were eating it up. You know, they dug it. You know, so that's part of the reason why it just sort of lived on. And then, like all fads, die a whimpering, slow death that two people hold on to for 50 years.
Yep.
Yeah.
Also, I've not seen any of the Twilight motion pictures. What I know the broad strokes, and I know a lot of that was Twilight. Like, what percentage of it was Twilight?
Saving her from a car. The idea of vampires having a baseball game during a thunderstorm.
Very true.
The idea of deciding you're going to marry a baby the second it's born.
Yeah, I knew that one wasn't coming off your dome.
The part where they
Thank God.
go on spider monkey runs in the forest. There is a part where he calls her spider monkey.
Okay, so that's not an actual thing that people do.
No, that's a vampire thing.
Okay.
Yeah, obviously. As it's been established by that. Oh, no, it's if you really want to watch some bad CGI talking wolves, get on Twilight.
Call of the Wild, starring Harrison
there
Ford.
You go, right.
That CGI talking wolves could be a movie trap theme.
Oh my, okay, yeah, absolutely.
And also, but to be clear, none of it was Twilight because it's the real story.
Oh, no, totally.
Absolutely.
Totally. I meant to say how much of it
Twilight
Twilight
adapted.
took from this story.
Right.
Right.
That makes sense.
I mean, great art imitates life. So, listeners, before we move on, actually, before we get into like the real meat of the plug section, don't hit that 15-second skip button because I want to let you know there is a listener survey on the website. Just put it together. It's 4 questions, totally anonymous, just designed to help us
figure out how you feel about Trump's performance as president. Mostly good, great, awesome, or other.
Best of all time.
It reminds me of the old Colbert joke about George W. Bush, great president or greatest president.
Yeah,
but this one is much more painful.
Begged Bush to come on his show so we could ask them that.
But also, review the show on your podcast app of choice. Written reviews especially are super helpful. They put more butts in the seats. And follow us on social media, Twitter or Instagram. I just deleted my personal Twitter and Instagram, so you're about to get a lot more bullshit on the revisionist Twitter and Instagram. You can also write us a letter, ask us a question, leave us a comment at revisionistpodcast.com. And if you are so inclined and are able to do so right now, support the show by pledging on Patreon. Even $1 a month buys you an extra right to vote. So there's that. You two, Russell and Zach, you co-host with friend of the show, Chris Boroff, The Movie Trap. Do you want to talk about that real quick?
Sure.
Yeah, we had Boroff on recently.
Or real long if you want also.
Yeah,
we had Boroff on recently, by the way, for the Frankenstein adjacent episode.
Indeed.
So we were covering all the ghouls. We really jumped the gun on that one. We should have saved it for Halloween.
A little bit.
At least that since he did the alternate history, I thought it was only fair that I take the actual what actually happened. So I thought that was fair. And just to put one over on Boroff, if you're listening, 3 movies in a row, Boroff. So yeah, we host a podcast called The Movie Trap. You could find it anywhere where you get your podcasts, including YouTube. It's basically a competitive book club. The idea is that there is a theme that we choose, that one host chooses, and then each host picks a movie in a round of 3. At the end of the theme, we vote on which one is the best movie. Whoever wins picks the next theme.
At the time of this release, we'll be in the middle of our Halloween mini streak.
Sure.
Where the bonus the bonus for this one is not going to be picking the next theme, which we already have picked. It's going to be political thrillers starting after Halloween. But instead, the winner gets a bonus movie that they could force the other people to watch. We already know who won, but we won't tell you here.
Exactly. And yes, so I think by the time this episode comes out, you'll probably have Don't Look Now would be the most recent episode. Yeah. So yeah, check us out. We have fun doing it. Zach's hilarious. We love having him. This is a podcast. Boroff and I have known each other for years. I've known Zach for years, and it's been great. Like I said, competitive book club.
Brian's been on before and will likely be on again. We might even have him on for a full round someday.
Indeed. I owe it to him for making him watch Police Academy. I figured I kind of owe it to him.
Been holding on to that one. Holding on to that grudge for months.
That's a movie that sticks with you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's a real way Homer, you know. It's a real can't see anything else when I close my eyes. It's a real Ringu, actually. Now that I think of it.
Back to the horror movies. Nice. In our spooky theme. Good job.
Listeners, as for me, I'm going to plug the thing we've been mentioning and sort of bringing up in passing this episode. Hey, vote this year, please.
Please.
It's not the end of change by any means, but it's also a necessary beginning to it. So please.
That requires very little effort on your part.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
There's a lot of other stuff you got to do after the fact. You still got to hold people's feet to the fire on certain issues afterwards and go to protests and rallies. And I understand there's also some sentiment that voting is completely ineffective and won't change anything, but we should try our hardest to make it work. And then if it doesn't work, we can do the other shit.
Yeah, that's
Indeed.
That's the sort of thing. That's what we need out there. Oh, Jesus. Also, hey, because I got a call from the blood bank right before recording, give blood. It's not like they'll stop.
That was the Highgate Vampire. He called. He wanted aid. Please donate some blood. Blah.
Blah. I'm on community service. I crashed into a playground at night. Don't worry, at night.
The doctor says I need the glasses.
My kids took my keys. Bat. That was the sound of him turning into a bat. Which I guess is just the joke from What We Do in the Shadows, basically.
Or, if you will, Bugs Bunny.
Yep, that's true. I will. Listeners, the first vote for the outcome of this episode falls to me, and I do appreciate the extra depth and a little bit of spice that Russell brought to the story. I'm gonna cast my vote for Zach's alternate, because now I don't feel the need to ever see Twilight. Not that I did before. but now I feel like I can discuss it in mixed company with a little bit more confidence that I didn't have.
Mission accomplished.
But voting is now open on Patreon if you're one of our donors. And be sure to check out our Instagram at Revisionist Podcast next Wednesday, whatever day that is, the 7th?
That sounds right. It's the 3rd on a Saturday, the 4th on a Sunday, the 5th, the Monday, the 7th is correct.
Yep. I'm having my wisdom teeth out October 2nd, so that was my little way into that. Because I'm a 32-year-old adult.
Calendar compass.
Yep. But Russell, thank you so much for joining us.
Truly an honor. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I had a lot of fun. Thank you so much. This was fun.
Yeah, thank you for doing it. Zach, thank you as always.
Of course.
For everyone here at the Revisionists, that'll do it for this Halloween episode. So listeners, you can now unwrap and eat your Twix for this episode. I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about.
But make sure to give all the candy to your parents who inspect for poison or
exactly.
edible marijuana.
Which is just marijuana. And then when your parents are checking your candy, eat your marijuana edible.
Indeed.
That's the secret.
Indeed.
And then just get real high at home with your parents.
Yeah.
The most
the
fun
scariest
place
part of the
probably
season
to get high. And then fucking play GoldenEye. I don't know.
What the fuck? Do you know what year it is, Brian? Do you actually know?
We
Children don't even know about the movie GoldenEye.
They released this
about the
Mario.
movie?
They released this Mario collection of like all the 3D Marios. They have Mario 64, and all the reviews are of younger kids going like, "I don't get this game. It's hard. It's weird. I don't understand it." And I'm like, "Oh man, I'm old."
I'm playing through Galaxy, and Jen is playing through 64 right now. We haven't touched Sunshine yet.
I love Sunshine. It's
I've not played it. I'm looking forward to it.
It's great. I cannot recommend it enough. Great Mario game.
But it is also like, 64 is much harder than...
Oh my God, yeah. And I spent hours when that game came out. I mean, I remember when that came out. I mean, I spent hours and hours on that game.
We're still in the podcast.
Sorry.
That's true.
We have it. Have a good time, everyone. Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween. Thanks for having me.
October 3rd, 1863. Abraham Lincoln declares the last Thursday in November to be Thanksgiving, or, as he called it at the time, Savory Halloween. October 3rd, 1957. The California Superior Court rules that Allen Ginsberg's Howl and Other Poems is not obscene, it just sucks. October 3rd, 1929. The Kingdom of Serbs, Croats, and Slovenes is renamed Yugoslavia, and bad news for anyone who was attached to that name.
October 3rd, 42 BC. Mark Antony and Octavian, later Augustus, win a decisive defeat against Caesar's assassins Brutus and Cassius. After the battle, Augustus Octavian felt so good that, despite already having August, he thinks he's going to take this one too. October 3rd, 1789. George Washington proclaims a Thanksgiving Day for that year, which is some Halloween erasure Christmas creep bullshit. Wait a minute, what's this? October 3rd, 1863, the last Thursday in November is declared Thanksgiving Day by Abraham Lincoln, inexorably connecting the war against slavery and the war against Christmas. And finally, October 3rd, 1963, a violent coup in Honduras begins 2 decades of military rule. Enjoy that W for the next 50 days, JFK.
Perfect. Oh, man.
Technically, JFK said he was against the coup and wanted to, pull out of relations with Honduras, but whatever.
But, I mean,